All right, so here we are. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Transcending Humanity. This is episode
30.
30. Yeah, thank you. I just
30.
completely forgot. Um, I am joined today by Taryn and our special guest, Lisa Bunker. And hi, everyone's saying hi. And today I'm going to let Taryn just take the lead. So just the usual like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Get this podcast out there. Um, the next episode or two after this, I will just be in the background because I'm getting my vocal surgery next week and I won't be able to talk. So, not sure who we will have hosting, but hopefully it'll be something interesting. So, yeah, Taryn, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, well, happy to be on today and talking with Lisa. So, Lisa, were you the first trans representative in the New Hampshire State House?
I and another trans person were elected at the same time. So
Okay.
my colleague Jerry Cannon and I were the first two trans people to be elected to the New Hampshire State House. And we were the second and third trans people to be elected to state legislatures anywhere in the US. So Danica Rome was the first. She got elected 2 years before I ran for the first time. And when the results of the 2016 election were announced, I was horrified, as many people were. And I really felt like I had to do whatever I could to stand up against the incoming administration and what it stood for and all that it was. And so I started looking around for what to do, and I discovered that it was pretty easy to run for office, for local office in New Hampshire. And I was inspired by Danica's example.
Yeah.
I love her story. I mean, she not only was the first out trans person elected to a state legislature, but she beat a 12-term incumbent who was the self-appointed chief homophobe of Virginia, and who was awful to her on the campaign trail, said terrible things about her, misgendered her. And she didn't run on identity. She didn't, like, I'm trans, elect me. She ran on local issues like a sensible politician. She lives in suburban Virginia, like within the zone of Washington, D.C. commutes, and they have terrible problems with clogged up arterials on commute days. She ran on that. She wanted to create new lanes or a bypass or something. And she wore out shoe leather, going door to door, canvassing in her district. She won election. She won re-election, and she's a literal and figurative rock star. I mean, she's a great person to be the first because she's got that star presence, and she's played in a heavy metal band and stuff. She's got that extra bit of pizzazz that I think it's good for a first person to have. So Jerry and I came along in her track, and now there's I don't know, some tens of trans people in state legislatures and city and county government and stuff. It's becoming much more regular now that somebody who's gender nonconforming in some way would run for public office and win.
They
Yeah.
can't stop us.
Yeah, I think with Danica, it was like, she just celebrated the win, right? And moved from delegate to senator, so state senator.
Yes, that's right.
My home state of Delaware, right? We have Sarah McBride, and I believe she's running for the House. So which is also another inspirational story, right? Of like just being out there, starting state and going into like the federal. And I mean, I think it would be amazing to have her in the US House. So with Danica, the thing that I was worried about, right? Because we're talking about 2016, right? That election, that's where I really felt like the hot war against trans folk was really started, right?
Yeah.
And it was from the Orange Oompa Loompa. And I call him the Oompa Loompa of hate, but he really kind of kicked off that
Yeah.
war. So I applaud all of your bravery, right, for stepping up and stepping into the light, because I think with visibility, it's a challenge, right? Because not everybody's ready to take that step. I think New Hampshire kind of falls into that blue state territory, at least for a chunk of it, more or less, right? Like Maine, there's a bit of toggle with libertarian and some conservative, but
it's pretty balanced in New Hampshire too, in part because the state has no state or income tax. There's no sales or income tax. So it's been a magnet in recent decades for libertarians. In New Hampshire, we call them the Free Staters, and they are a significant bloc. They're a significant voting bloc, especially up in the northern part of the state, smaller communities. And they're a significant presence in the state legislature. So it's a 400-seat chamber. It's a huge chamber. And my first term, the Democrats were in the majority. My second term, the Republicans were. The most recent one, it was almost exactly evenly balanced. So it's a very purple state. It's really
Right.
sort of evenly balanced. But the Free Staters are a smaller but vocal and powerful minority, and they really kind of drive the party for most of the time. Every once in a while, a vote would come up. I mean, most of the time, the GOP voted in lockstep. They're pretty well whipped within their own party in the in the official legislative meaning of the term. So they were expected to vote with the party line at all times. But every once in a while, a vote would come up where there would be a different split. Where to some of the really out there libertarian stuff, we had somebody who wanted to pass a state constitutional amendment to have New Hampshire secede from the Union, and the vote on that one went 80-320. So the 80 was the Free Staters, and the 320 was everybody else.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks ago, when they were trying to elect a speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives, we saw that happen. We saw the moderate mainstream Republicans break with the hardcore right-wing faction of their party and defeat Jim Jordan as speaker. So it can still happen, and that gave me a lot of hope that the moderate GOP are getting fed up and ready to maybe assert themselves a little bit more.
We talked about that a couple episodes ago about like the moderates are somewhat, I think it's kind of like it's at least a population that's kind of going extinct, right? Because there's so much galvanization at the federal level in terms of like what we will call the MAGA crowd, right? The vocal minority that have an unyielding grasp on power at the federal level. And I think like, seeing those moderates, like, and that's what I would consider the Eisenhower Republican, right? Like somebody who's just about doing stuff, like you said, running on the smart things, which is like fixing roads, building bridges, doing stuff like that help the actual people, right? I feel like that is getting smaller and smaller, at least in voice, because like at the federal level, I feel like you have a whole bunch of people that might disagree with it, but are worried about their personal security, their safety, or just being dredged over Fox News. So at the state level, it's a little bit different, right? The dynamics are totally different. So the state that I was from in Delaware, it was a solidly blue state after, I think a nice tilt of Republican rule. So it's been a reliable blue state, but there are pockets, right, in my state where it was, you have the North, the South, a little more liberal, and then that center agricultural base, a little bit more conservative. So there's always been that balance. So Delaware's kind of like that middle of the road. And I'm sure you had some of that in New Hampshire, right? You've got the extremes on either end, but then you all have to come together and try to keep the government working. Do you think that the way New Hampshire was structured in politics, right, that either aided you or maybe gave you a bit of a bump to break out and to be able to serve a couple terms?
I was able to serve a couple terms because I happened to live in a safely blue district. I didn't understand how easy it was going to be. When I started out, I worked really hard to get elected. But then I realized in my second term that if I wanted to, I could just coast. I didn't want to. I wanted to show up and do the work and represent. But New Hampshire has so many representatives that were broken up into tiny districts. In fact, I was one of 4 representatives for the small town of Exeter. So even a small town has 4 people in the state house. And Exeter's built around Phillips Exeter Academy. It's a school town. So it's a reliably blue state, or a district rather. So I could have served as long as I wanted. The balance of power shifts in New Hampshire because of a handful of districts that are really close and could go either way, depending on turnout, depending on what's driving the election. I think in 2018, the Democrats took control because the Republicans had gotten what they wanted, and it wasn't a presidential year. And I saw a very clear difference when I was canvassing. This was pre-COVID, so I knocked on a lot of doors and talked to, I don't know, about 300 people in my district over the course of many months. And when I talked to Democrats, they were like, "Oh my God, we have to do something. This is terrible." And the Republicans were like, "Oh, there's an election, you know?" So that was the difference in 2018. When we got to 2020, and it was a question whether we were going to have 4 more years of the Oompa Loompa or try to get back on a different track again, then everybody was motivated, and the state house actually went back to slim Republican majority.
Well,
So
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done. It has to do. Each election is its own animal. Is the point?
Yeah, and I think 2018 there was a real rise in resistance. So like for me, before Twitter became X, you know, I was in those resistant pods, right? Kind of getting the message out, promoting Democratic politicians at the federal level. And I feel like 2018 was a real year for us to stand up against that Oompa Loompa, right? So like at the state level for you, it was an easier entry, but also there was a lot going on at the federal level to try and like blunt the effect of what the 2016 election was. All right, so I want to toggle over to your time in the House. So what for you, and this, and I think Vanessa's, as she's trying to get on the ballot to run in Ohio, right? What were your proudest moments, you know, being a representative for your district, right? In that House. And I just want to remind folks that it's like 400 representatives or delegates, right? For what, like 1 million people? Like, I don't know.
1.3 million people. Yeah. So in the whole state. So by the
right.
numbers, we each represented 3,500 people. It was really kind of local government on a state scale.
Right. So it's like you had the number of US House members, but instead of for 330 million, it was just over 1 million. So for you, what were your proudest accomplishments or moments for you over that 4-year like course? And I think you had 2 terms. So it was 2018 to 2022.
Correct. I certainly showed up for rainbow bills. I co-sponsored a couple of bills and showed up to testify for or against other bills along the way. We were deep. New Hampshire was deep in the sort of the same battles that we've seen everywhere around the country in recent years. There was a bathroom bill. There was a school sports bill. There was one hard right Republican who every 2 years submits the same bill, which is the one that wants to define gender care for minors as child abuse. We did successfully, in my time in the House, pass an X marker on state documents. We got that done. So we were fighting all the bills, you know, we were fighting all the fights that have been fought in states and in the nation in recent years. I was proud to be involved in that. But that was only part of it. I got pretty deeply involved in the debate over guns. That was something that I showed up at meetings for. And I was particularly proud to be in the chamber the day that we overrode the governor's veto on the repeal of the death penalty. This was a long time coming in New Hampshire. It's a decades-long fight. Very interesting to be in that chamber on that day because it was not along party lines. And party leadership on both sides was very clear about that. They said, this is a conscious issue. And, you know, a hardcore right-wing Republican got up and talked about how he used to be vehemently pro-death penalty, but then his wife passed away. And it was a terrible, terrible loss for him. It just hit him really, really hard. And he didn't want anybody else in the world to unnecessarily suffer the loss of a loved one, even one who'd been convicted of a penalty, you know, a crime worthy of the death penalty. So that changed his mind. On the other hand, I had a sort of conservative leaning Democrat who sat next to me in the chamber who was deeply conflicted about the vote. He's a pro-gun Democrat, and in his mind, the death penalty and gun rights were connected. And in the New Hampshire House, you cannot refrain from voting. If you are present, you must vote yes or no. In other state houses, there's a present but not voting button or an abstain button. But in New Hampshire, you got a red button and a green button. And if you're in the chamber, you have to vote. So if you really don't know what you're going to do, you just get up and leave. You walk out before the vote is called. He did. My colleague who sat next to me did. And we had 2/3 votes plus 1 and overrode the governor's veto. And now there is not a death penalty in New Hampshire. And that was a day where if I had shown up, I had not shown up, the vote would have gone the other way. So every once in a while, when the numbers are close, it really matters who's there, who stays in the chamber, down to the last single human, either way. That was a really interesting moment. And just by being there, I was helping, 400 state lawmakers, 398 state lawmakers get used to the idea of trans people, because they had to work with me and Jerry. They just had to deal with us. And some of them, I really felt the difference too with the sort of the hardcore people versus the more moderate ones. The moderate ones would be courteous and pleasant to your face. And they still vote the way they vote, but they were perfectly willing to treat a person as a equal colleague and to respect pronoun choices. I mean, it went really well. I didn't have any nasty face-to-face encounters in my entire time there, but there were some very awkward moments. There were some cold stares. There was just a few people there who really are deep into a belief system where people who don't fit into the traditional binary categories to them are evil or dangerous or an abomination, or they couldn't see me as a human. And
Right.
I mean, there's this very interesting moment. I had a split second to make a decision one day. I came around a corner in a hallway. I was walking in a curvy hallway. I came around a corner into a short section of hall, and coming around the other corner in the other direction was the rep that I mentioned before, who every 2 years sponsors the bill to define gender care for minors as child abuse. Just the two of us alone, face to face for 3 seconds. And I had to decide what to do. And I am proud to say that my natural instinct was to smile at him and say, "Good morning." And his response was a kind of monosyllabic grunt, a little But I elicited a response.
Right.
I engaged him with a standard courtesy, and I got him to respond at least a little bit. And I'm actually as proud of that as anything else I did in those 4 years in the State House, because
Yeah.
I made him deal with me as a human.
Yeah. And I think, like, I know I mentioned this on the pod before and on other pods, but I feel like for those of us that are out invisible, right, and like we're doing the work, I like publicly, where people can see us and we're not like, doing it from a keyboard. I feel like we're transambassadors, right? Where we're here to show people. So Vanessa knows I'm both trans guardian and both transambassador, but
And trans menace.
trans menace. But like the transambassador, right? It's like I was recounting with my CEO today that I was on a flight to New Orleans visiting, we were doing bachelorette party, and I met this couple that never met a trans person, like an out trans person from Minnesota. We had the best conversation on the plane, right? And we were talking about like where to go, things to do, and stuff like that. They wanted to have breakfast with me 2 days later, right? I've got pictures in Jackson Square with them, but it was just like, I want people to see me as, a human being, like you said, right? Like, you run us over with a car, we die. You cut us, we bleed. We eat, we love, we live, we pay taxes. Unless you're in New Hampshire, I'm just kidding.
Yes, no, you're right.
But that's the thing, right? It's like, those of us that have the privilege of being visible and just, using that visibility, we're showing people by us existing and by us living and thriving that we are just like them, where there's nothing that vastly different from us, And Vanessa, I know we've been kind of hogging it up. Do you have any questions? I know you're running for Ohio, trying to get on the ballot.
Yeah, which should be interesting. I'm planning on filing my paperwork next week, and
Have you got
hopefully
your
I have enough.
signatures?
I have around 60 of the 50 that I need, which isn't a lot, but it's an attempt. So, but it's very hard where I live to get them, and I've tried doing quite a bit of door knocking, and no one answers their doors around here. So, but yeah, I'm now it should be interesting if I get on the ballot, since I'm the second trans woman in Ohio to be on the ballot. And I now have an OnlyFans account too, which should spice things up a little bit. So should have fun with that.
A tip for canvassing,
Hmm.
carry dog biscuits. Like if you got a little pocket in your hip pack or whatever, because you're gonna sooner or later you're gonna encounter a hostile canine, and nothing diffuses that moment more than
Then a
a
biscuit.
couple a
That's a
couple
good
of milk
idea.
bones. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure if I get on a ballot, I'll be canvassing at that point. So, but this is my kind of throwing it out there, and we'll see. But
Good luck.
You're
thank
both
you.
you're both very inspirational to me, right? You're both taking that step forward where, you know, we're all visible, we're all out, and you know, but you two are taking that leap in to represent, right?
Mhm.
To lead, to help, to build something. So, Lisa, do you have any advice for people listening that might be considering a run for office in the state level or city level? That just things that they should think of or consider, or you know, maybe an approach that you can share that you've kind of had to learn, right? Like maybe you didn't
Right.
know, but you want to share something. Any tips for people out there listening that could help them?
Sure. There's a lot of help available. There's a lot of sort of organizations on the national level that will help specifically LGBTQ people who want to run for office. There's a thing called the Victory Fund. There's all enormous amount of sort of nuts and bolts help available from these organizations. They'll tell you how to build a campaign. I mean, again, I want to stress my situation was pretty unusual and unique in that I really didn't have to build a campaign staff or raise an enormous amount of money or anything. It was like running for a very small local office. I raised a few $1,000s by emailing my friends and acquaintances with an ask, and I had some lawn signs made, and I printed some pamphlets, and I knocked on a bunch of doors. I didn't have a campaign manager. I didn't have a staff. So it gets more complicated if you're hiring people and buying media and things like that. But there's lots of help available. And it's important to cross your T's and dot your I's with regards to filing deadlines and reporting. And there's a bunch of stuff that, you know, you need to be transparent about your finances. Obviously, I don't know the situation in other states or what it's like to run for federal office, but this is a thing that lots and lots of people have done before, and you don't have to reinvent it. You can get templates and guidance, and I would urge people who are thinking of it to do that. And then I think after that, it's important to just, you know, run on the issues. The fact that we are gender nonconforming is incidental to our campaigns, not the center.
Right.
At least that was my feeling. It was important not to stress that.
Yeah, not focusing it on mine either.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, you know, we are competent and engaged humans with the impulse to serve. We care about the issues. We care about the other people in our country, and you know, we're stepping up. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trans. So anyway, as I was saying, highways. As I
Yeah.
was saying, guns. As I was saying, insurance.
We're
You
just
know,
citizens. We're wired differently. That's all.
in this one area that has no
Yeah,
immediate bearing on public service.
exactly.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you know, some of the older conservative white men that we may end up serving with may be uncomfortable. That's their problem,
Fuck
not
'em.
our problem.
Yeah, that's really, yeah. I think
Also, I was careful about my online presence. I went and scrubbed a few things because people will go looking for anything to make you look bad.
Yeah, I'm embracing the stuff that makes me look bad. So
It's an approach. I am not a confrontational human by nature. I actually ended up, I stopped serving because we decided to move, but I wouldn't have run again if we had stayed, because I was tired of the dominant idea that what we were engaged in collectively was a war with two sides and only one could win. All the time I was in New Hampshire, I'm a both and kind of person, a we and us kind of person. I want to try to find ways to talk about all of us
yeah.
together collectively. And I tried a bunch of different ways while I was there, and I just felt like the words were whipped out of my mouth by the wind. There's so many people on both sides of the aisle committed to the model of this is war and only one side can win.
right.
And so I got frustrated, and I felt like I was not being effective. And I decided to step out of that arena. I have endeavors in many areas in life, and that was one for a while, but now back to other things.
Yeah, I want to hear about the writing.
Yeah. So tell us about so you're out in California.
I
So
live in Sacramento now. Yeah.
yeah, so tell us about the decision to move and what you're doing now.
So I lived in New Hampshire for about 7 years. I moved there from Maine because I met someone on OkCupid, and we had our cosmic soulmate zap and got together and got married. And about 2 years ago, we started talking about, hey, maybe we want a new adventure. And my spouse Dawn has a brother who she loves very much, who lives in California, down south in Carpinteria. And we were originally thinking, let's just move close to him, but we couldn't afford houses in Santa Barbara. So we started drawing bigger circles, and then discovered this. I grew up in Southern California. My father was a professor at UC Irvine back in the day in the chemistry department. So I grew up in Orange County in the 60s. And I was taught a prejudice against Sacramento. I was taught that it was inhabited entirely by Republicans, and that there was no culture and there were no trees, and that it was, a desert wasteland, which turns out not to be the case at all. It's a gorgeous city. It's called the Canopy City, among other things, because there's so many trees. There's rivers. There's a huge LGBTQ population. It's racially diverse. There's a thriving arts scene. I'm now a member of a local choir. Having a great time here. So we found the city that we liked and visited and liked it even better. And there's a thriving Unitarian Universalist church, which is important to us. We're active UUs. So we found our new community, and we just, let's go do our third somewhere else. And here we are, figuring out how to be involved.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, I love California. I've been out here since 2018.
From
So,
where?
Delaware.
From Delaware. Yeah. Did you experience any kind of culture shock? Because I did. Or shock's a strong word. Cultural adjustments. Like, for example, I wanted to plug into the local activist community. And there was this, I found out that there's this, being the state capital, there's a lot of sort of demonstration, people enacting opinions on the public stage. So I found out that there was a small group of so-called detransitioners who were going to show up on the states of the Capitol and give speeches. And I started Googling to find out who's going to show up in opposition to these people, because I wanted to go and, wave a trans flag and show up in opposition to this sort of pernicious narrative that these people were pushing. I couldn't find anybody. The local LGBTQ center was not showing up. There was one group, they're called Pride Was a Riot Sacramento, and they're the militant 20-somethings who were going to show up, wrapped in black and engaged in kind of, sort of riot protocols. That was it. It was the detransitioners and Pride Was a Riot, and a whole bunch of people with cameras. It was weird political theater, and I sort of figured out the kind of activism that I was used to in New Hampshire, where anything would happen, people at my church would show up on a certain street corner downtown with signs and flags, and get honks from passing cars and stuff. That was how we engaged in the public debate. That doesn't happen here. Yeah. I think in part because at the state level, at least with regards to laws that have been passed, most of the big fights have already been won. I mean, and I think as a result, there's a certain easy complacency in the LGBTQ community. There's not a feeling of threat, and people just go about their happy lives, and volunteer and take care of their dogs. I don't know, whatever it is people do, and work and have families and all the things that they do. So there's a certain complacency here. There's a certain feeling of, what am I going to point my energy at? Because there's no fights left to fight. And what I've settled on is looking around me and actually seeing what actually needs, who needs help in Sacramento. And it's unhoused people need help in Sacramento, not the LGBTQ community so much per se, although those circles obviously overlap. But yeah, I actually have a interview tomorrow at a local service agency to see about volunteering once a week. So, adjusting, actually looking around, but instead of sort of trying to impose my ideas or my habits on my new location, taking a moment to see what needs to be done and then stepping in on that.
I think that's a smart play, right? So like for me, I think with the activism, because I was very politically active on the East Coast. Like I was, if there was a parade, I'm marching and waving signs for candidates. I'm knocking on doors. I was running from polling place to polling place, carrying the registry, right? Taking it back to Democratic headquarters so they know who to call, who to motivate, who to activate. Supported candidates that lost by a hair, supported candidates that won.
Yeah.
Meet like every federal politician there and every state politician. I even got to meet and shake Joe Biden's hand once, so I claim to fame. But it was like, just meeting them and just being super, super active. It's a little bit different out here. So like I'm in South Bay. So right now I'm sitting in Santa Clara, but I live in Sunnyvale. So I'm like smack dab between Apple and Google headquarters. But the city, like so San Francisco, there's still some activism there, right? And unhoused people are definitely like a focal point of doing that. And just affordable housing. For me every year, and I would love to meet up with you if you come in June to Pride. I always volunteer at the Trans March, right? And there's still trans work to be done in the city. I mean, it's got a long storied history, right, in San Francisco, but there's also some of those clinics that need our support, need funding. I am the kind of person who will, just Venmo a trans person in my network or community to help them with housing. I've got one friend of mine who, is living in a van that they're kind of rehabbing, and just like, hey, like I'm just trying to help out wherever I can in a very small level, right? Like in a very personal kind of network community, and just do what I can. I think that for culture shock, I think the food for me only this was a little bit better. Like it took me 5 years to find good pizza in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Although the Mexican food is fantastic.
it's spectacular and definitely like Japanese or like Thai. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to us about what you're working on now. So you've got a book.
Authoring is my main gig. I have 5 published books at this point. The most recent one came out just a few weeks ago from a local micro-publisher here in Sacramento. Hold this up. This is Almond, Quartz, and Finch. It's a novel for readers of all ages. It's suitable for middle grade and up. And it's a fantasy in that it takes place in an imaginary land long ago and far away, but after that, there's no magic or dragons. It's all human story. There's palace intrigue, there's family drama, there's some cultural strife, there's a touch of romance. And this book, one of the sort of original germs for this book was the what if question. What if there was a culture where children were raised without gender and got to choose at a certain age with appropriate ceremony? And the choices include a non-binary option, and the children are raised with non-binary or non-gendered names. So the 3 words in the title, Almond, Quartz, and Finch, are all names of characters. And they have special pronouns. I invented and have used in most of my books my own set of gender neutral singular pronouns, vo, ven, and veir. So I put those in several books now. And this was another origin moment for this book, was I wanted to explain where those pronouns came from, the ones that I had already used in other books. So this is like the origin story of my pronouns. This is, for me, writing it's a form of pleasure. It's what I was born to do. It's just what my brain is set up to do in the world. It's like by the time I was 5, I already knew in some way that I was not actually a boy, and I was not going to make sense as a man, although I was not able to articulate that clearly for a long time. And I also knew that I was born to make stories. These are just these are things that I was born as a trans person, a writer. I've been doing it all my life, and I love doing it, but I also see it as a form of activism, because all of my stories have lots of LGBTQ characters, and so far they've all been for young readers. The projects I'm considering now will be for adult audiences, so that's a new thing for me. But the books so far have all been for young readers, and they all feature LGBTQ protagonists and side characters, without that really being the preachy point. It's not a lesson in the form of a novel. It's an exciting, engrossing read that also happens to give you the opportunity to learn more about the life of a trans girl or a young gay boy or a non-binary introvert. Yes, I see it as my necessary work, the thing that I was put on the planet to do. Although I have to say, having said that, I put 5 years of work into this most recent book, and reception has been muted, to say the least. I feel like I'm tossing pebbles in the ocean and they're going bloop and disappearing. So it's a lot of work for not a lot of return. And I'm not hung up on fame per se. You know, I don't necessarily want to be #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, but I'd like to have some impact. I'd like to reach some people. And I feel like publishing books maybe is not my best choice. I don't know. Maybe it's time to start a YouTube channel or something. So I'm actually in this very interesting phase right now of what's my next project, trying to sort out what that's going to be. The book ideas do keep coming back. When I go to the Y in the morning and swim, and I've got that sort of free mental time, it is plot points that are percolating in my brain more than what I would say if I was going on YouTube and expressing opinions at the world. So probably going to write another book. Yeah, it's probably time to get started on a new project. It's what I have to do, I guess.
It's a
Otherwise,
craft.
you go insane.
So where can folks, like, so you mentioned micro publisher. So are they available in digital as well?
My most recent book is available as a paperback, and it's available as an ebook, and it's available as an audiobook. I worked 30 years in radio, so I have both the technical and the vocal skills, and I narrated and recorded my own audiobook, which was really, really fun. And it's available everywhere. I mean, the fact that it's a micro publisher is it's interesting from an industry point of view, but it has nothing to do with the availability of the book. Anywhere you order books, you can order my books.
That's kind of where I was getting to. Like, you know, when you mentioned micro publisher, I'm like, because I know I have a friend of mine who writes, right, and it's more like lesbian erotica, and she self-publishes on Amazon. So, like, that's what I want to get to. Like, are these books available on like an Amazon or an audiobook or?
Yep, they're available on Audible, Apple Music, Amazon. But I would encourage anybody who's interested in supporting their author friends. Don't use those if you can avoid them, especially Amazon. Use your local indie bookstore. They can order it for you. Any good bookstore can buy any book for you. And Jeff Bezos does not need any more of our money than he's already got. And the local bookstores are always one hair away from not being able to meet their monthly obligations. So support your local indie bookstore. But please do read my books. I'm frustrated because I feel like people are skittish about projects like this. It's like I say, it's my new book, and they're like, they start edging away, and they get this wary look in their eyes, and it's like, okay, let me phrase this a different way. I spent a couple of years making the most beautiful thing I know how to make, and I would like to share it with you. And all it will cost you is $12.99 and 8 hours of your time. And I'm really, really proud of it. And I'm a good writer. I make good stories. You're going to enjoy this. So I'm still trying to figure out how to effectively market creative work in today's creativity saturated internet driven economy. Everybody's making something. How do you decide what you're actually going to pay attention to? To whom among all the creators in your life are you going to give the precious gift of your sustained attention? This is the puzzle of the day. And I'm still trying to figure out my own answer to it as a marketer of my own work.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a challenge. I mean, trying to like, trying to get that creativity and that work seen, right? Because I know when I hear writing a book, I'm just like, oh my God, like, I want to read this, but I'm like, I have no time for anything else. So I'm just like, it feels like another time sink, right? Like, yeah, it's hard for me because I love reading, but I'm like, it's setting that time down and chilling out and just being able to like dive into that book. So no, we'll definitely look it up. And I do have a really small little bookstore about a mile from my apartment in Sunnyvale. So I'll be heading there and seeing if I can order it there.
Yes. And we will, I'll link to whatever you want me to link on the episode description on our YouTube channel and everything, so people can just can they easily get to it through your website?
I'm going to direct you to, I'll give you my website link, which is lisabunker.net.
Yeah.
And then New Wind Publishing has it too. They're the publisher, and you can order it direct from the publisher.
Okay.
Great, awesome. Vanessa, anything from you? You've been relatively quiet on this,
I mean,
out of character.
well, that's why I said I wanted to hand it over to you today. So, but
Well,
um,
I hope I lived up to those lofty expectations.
you always do. You always do. Tell me about your life in radio.
That was my work for 30 years. I worked at various public radio affiliates around the country starting in the 80s. And the last 14 years of my radio time, I was the program director of the community radio station in Portland, Maine. And this is old school community radio. It's like totally freeform, entirely volunteer driven. For most of my time there were 3 paid staff people, and we were a 24/7 live broadcast service. And it was everything. It was wildly eclectic, and I loved that. Everything from heavy metal to sound collage to public affairs to radio drama to just whatever people wanted to make radio about on a weekly basis.
That's so cool.
And I was the trainer. I was the person who trained people to be hosts on the air. And I talked about radical acceptance of your real voice. I was still an unexpressed transhuman when I started that job. I had my moment of gender revelation and went through gender transition while I had that job. And it's a classic example of teaching other people the thing that you most need to do yourself, most need to learn yourself. I'm telling thousands of people, just talk the way you talk. Be who you really are on the air. And so I was telling others what I most needed to hear myself. It was a very interesting experience to come out as trans and go through gender transition while working at a radio station. Intensely social job, but and it was frightening at the time. It was a very heightened experience. The highs were high and the lows were low. But in retrospect, I had a really good transition. I didn't lose anything of value to me. I didn't lose family or work or friends. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm Vanessa, I want to sort of I'm interested to talk to you for a second about your upcoming surgery, because there was a time in my own to set the stage for this. I came out as trans 15 years ago and went through what I now consider to be sort of a traditional binary transition. I claimed femininity in the world, claimed identity as a trans woman. Just this past summer, I decided, you know what? I'm actually not done. I'm a non-binary person. It didn't occur to me as a revelation. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I was still stuck thinking, okay, if I'm going to transition again, I need to pick a new name. I didn't want to pick a new name. It was enough of a hassle the first time. But I finally just realized, especially if I'm writing books about non-binary characters and trying to sort of express my deep distrust and concern about binary thinking and how it inevitably leads to social dysfunction and to the rise of totalitarianism. I mean, I think we've got a real problem with binary thinking. I want to dismantle as much as possible. So I think I need to live that in my life. So I've pulled back. I'm now identifying as non-binary. I'm using they, them pronouns, or Vauban, Veir, if people are receptive to it. And for a long time, right after I transitioned, and I was still thinking, okay, now I have to be a woman in all the ways that I live. I've got to project femininity. I've got to pass. I was unhappy with my voice. I went through male puberty. I have a low bass voice. And I used to love to sing back in the day, and I felt like I couldn't sing anymore. I felt like I couldn't talk comfortably on the radio for a long time. Now I'm back. I'm talking in the voice I talk in. I'm wearing I'm singing bass too in a local concert choir.
You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. And when we perform, I wear a gown instead of a tux, and that's me. I'm a I'm a low-voiced, non-binary person named Lisa wearing female clothing in public. And here you are getting a surgery, which when I was learning about these things 10 years ago sounded risky and doubtful? Maybe it's better than it
It's better
was.
now. Actually, listen to our last episode, episode 29. I
Yeah.
interviewed a surgeon who does the trach shave and the vocal feminization, and he's out of LA. So, but if you're curious about like the inner workings of it, listen to that one. But it's become such a standard. It's not as risky of a thing anymore. It's been around long enough. It used
Yeah.
to be something that was more like, whoa, what is this? But what they do is they go in through your mouth and they put essentially like a looking at the camera, essentially like a rubber band. They kind of stitch it in around your vocal cords. So, and
Just
it raises the
shorten
pitch.
them somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It raises the pitch. You still have to do vocal feminization training like what I have, because we're going to switch into the dead voice right now. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've done a lot of work to feminize it and stuff like that. But I have a lot of strain on the pitch, especially being um, autistic. When I have my episodes, I can't keep the voice, and
Mm.
it triggers me even more than just going through an episode does. So, and the trach shave I'm just doing while I'm in there. I haven't seen my
Yeah.
Adam's apple since high school, but I am slowly losing weight. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, I went through a number of, modifications. I've had sexual reassignment surgery. I've had facial feminization surgery, a couple of, got my hairline redone.
mhm,
And now that I've sort of swung back to the middle, between the two endpoints, I'm content with all of those things. I don't feel as intense about them as I used to.
mhm.
I definitely needed to get the SRS. I did not want to have testicles and a
I had
penis
that.
anymore.
I had that
Um,
3 months ago. It's the best. It's the
it's
best.
it's so amazing.
Yes.
And I want to write about the power of testosterone someday,
Yeah.
because it's so, life is so completely different with and without, how
Black and white.
sexualized you are all the time, how
Hmm.
angry you are, how aggressive. And I didn't realize how completely it was coloring my understanding of my own existence and
Hmm.
the way I moved through the world. It's a one powerful molecule. Damn. And I think one way of summing up what's troubling our planet right now is there's just too much testosterone.
There really
Too many,
is.
yeah, there's way more than we need, and it's a problem.
It certainly is. Um, yeah, I mean, personally, I'm going down the list of surgeries. I had an orchiectomy a year ago. I had my vaginoplasty 3 months ago. I have my vocal feminization next week. I'm going back. I have some issues with my labia that I'm getting adjusted, adjusted. In that's why I was looking down. It was actually my surgeon's office trying calling me over and over again to try to get me scheduled. Looks like
Yeah,
that'll be end of February, and then eventually I'll do facial feminization surgery. But I need income first because that shit's expensive.
yeah.
But it's yeah, everybody's journey on that is individual though. I mean, the vaginoplasty, you have two of us here talking about how amazing that is, and oh, it's the best. It's the best.
And just preaching to the choir, we never know who's going to end up listening to this.
Mhm.
There's a point I like to make, which is, there's no test you have to pass to
No,
be trans. You don't have to have had surgery. You don't have to have any modifications.
don't even have to be on
Um,
hormones.
what the most basic fact of the trans experience is, if you say you are, you are.
Mhm.
That's all that's required. It's internal experience. We have to take each other's word for it. So I just like to get that teaching moment in, if anybody's
Yes.
listening who didn't already know that. And you can trust people when they
Mhm.
tell you, even 3-year-olds, you can trust
Yes.
them if they persistently, insistently, consistently tell you, I am not a girl, I'm a boy. I am not a boy, I am a girl. You can believe them.
Mhm.
They know better than you ever will. So, yeah, just
Well,
getting those talking points in
That's
there.
important to get out there. We've mentioned it before, but it's been a minute since we have. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
thank you for that.
everyone's journey is valid. So, like,
Mhm.
I sit here with you two, having nothing done, electrolysis and hormones. That's it.
Mhm.
And I'm happy with that. So, as a mixed indigenous person, I'm a two-spirit.
Mhm.
So I am weaving the male and female into a stronger, different being. And I'm 100% good with that.
I love it. It's
Love it.
you are
That's great.
an amazing, beautiful, kick-ass human being, Taryn. And that's one thing that I love about this podcast is it's brought some of us together that we have like this bond. And it's wild. So people that we likely never would have met otherwise. So, but
You're my peeps.
yeah, exactly. So I know Taryn has to scooch off to another podcast because she's pretty popular today. I
It's the
mean,
California life. It's so hard.
yeah. When you're in your little, is that your studio at work that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
studio room. So
yeah.
I've got so my CEO's got a podcast called The Spark of Ages,
Mhm.
where we talk to creators of all stripes. And we talk about what that moment was that they had that aha moment, and then how they got people to buy into it. How, like, because that's the thing, you can have that aha moment and never have anybody buy into it, but getting people to buy into your vision.
Yeah.
And so we've got a little strategy meeting that we have every week. So I got to toggle over to that. Lisa, it was amazing to meet you in person.
Same here.
Yes.
And to talk to you. And Vanessa, always good to see you, boo boo.
Mhm.
So, all right, well, that's all we've got for this episode. I think we'll have some links for where these books are available. I'm going to go hit my bookstore this weekend and see if I can get your book ordered, and looking forward to reading it. And thanks again for being part of this. And folks, if you're listening to this, you find value, you love what we're saying, or maybe we're inspiring you, smash that subscribe button. Follow us, download this episode. We've got 30 episodes in. We want to hear from you, and we want you to join us on the journey. So thanks so much.
Thank you, both of you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely.